Everyone thinks INFJs disappear because they're tired, overwhelmed, or simply burned out. But the truth is far darker. They withdraw when they reach a point no one ever notices, a point where silence becomes the only safe place left. It's not exhaustion that takes them away. It's the realization that they've been giving their soul to people who never truly saw it. And when an INFJ reaches that threshold, the world doesn't hear a warning. It just feels the sudden absence of someone who held everything together quietly. There's always a moment before the withdrawal, a shift they feel in their bones. The emotional weight grows heavier. The room feels colder. The people around them become louder, needier, and less aware. INFJs sense the storm long before it breaks, and they step back because staying would mean betraying themselves. Their disappearance is not collapse, it's protection. It's the dark doorway they walk through when they've carried too much for too long and finally see that no one else is carrying anything for them. Before this story unfolds fully, I want to ask you something. Have you ever vanished from everyone's life and no one even asked why? If this resonates with you, write the word shadow in the comments so I know you're here and you understand. And if you're new, subscribe, because this channel tells the truths INFJs have been forced to keep inside for years. INFJs withdraw not from exhaustion, but because they detect emotional danger long before anyone else does. They feel the shift before it becomes visible, the tension before anyone names it, the fracture before the first crack appears. An INFJ doesn't pull away because they are tired. They pull away because something in the emotional atmosphere changes in a way most people never notice. Their intuition works like a quiet alarm system, picking up subtle cues. The pause in someone's voice, the forced smile, the sudden heaviness in the room. Others see normal interactions. The INFJ sees a storm building behind them. They sense motives before actions, intentions before behaviors, outcomes before decisions are even made. And when that inner signal begins to hum, their withdrawal isn't a choice. It's self-preservation. They walk away not because they're weak, but because they understand exactly what staying will cost. Emotional danger for an INFJ isn't always loud or dramatic. It's the slow erosion of their peace, the silent expectation that they keep absorbing negativity, the invisible draining that nobody acknowledges but them. They leave when they sense the environment is no longer safe for their spirit, even if no one else feels anything wrong. They retreat the moment someone's energy turns manipulative, unstable, or quietly harmful. Staying would mean betraying their own inner truth, and INFJs have learned that ignoring their intuition leads to deeper wounds. So they step back early, quietly, and without explanation. To others, it looks sudden. To the INFJ, it was inevitable. Their withdrawal is the moment they choose clarity over chaos, protection over pressure, and peace over pretending. They disappear not to escape, but to survive what everyone else is still blind to. They disappear when they realize they've been carrying the emotional weight of everyone around them alone. An INFJ rarely notices the burden at first. They're too busy supporting, soothing, listening, absorbing. They step into the emotional gaps others leave behind, often without being asked, because it feels natural to them. But over time, the room gets heavier. People lean on them a little more, reveal a little more, depend a little more. The INFJ becomes the confidant, the emotional translator, the unspoken healer, holding everything together while no one stops to wonder who holds them. And then one quiet moment arrives when the truth becomes impossible to ignore. They've been carrying everyone else's pain while having nowhere to put their own. That realization hits like a silent collapse inside the chest. They see how much energy they've poured into maintaining harmony that others never even noticed. They see how often they've been the emotional anchor for people who never once asked if they were drifting too. They see how their empathy turned into a responsibility they never agreed to take on. And when the weight becomes undeniable, something shifts. It isn't anger. It isn't resentment. It's a deep internal recognition that staying any longer will break something inside them that may never fully return. So they disappear, quietly, gently, but decisively. Not to punish anyone, not to create drama, but to breathe again, to exist without being needed every second. to feel their own emotions without drowning in others. Their disappearance is not abandonment, it is liberation from a burden they were never meant to carry alone. And once they step back, once they finally feel the lightness of their own space, they understand how long they've been suffocating. They don't leave because they were weak, they leave because they were strong for too long. Their retreat begins the moment they sense their boundaries are being crossed repeatedly without acknowledgment. INFJs rarely announce their limits. They express them gently, subtly, often through tone or small shifts in energy. They expect others to notice, because they always notice. But when someone keeps pushing, taking, intruding, or assuming access to their emotional world without reflection, something inside the INFJ starts to fracture. It begins quietly, a slight withdrawal in conversation, a soft distancing of presence, a moment where the INFJ eyes stop glowing with warmth and shift into observation. They feel the boundary violation long before it becomes obvious. And when it keeps happening, the retreat has already begun. It's not the act itself that hurts, it's the disregard. The feeling of being unseen while being deeply perceptive. The frustration of having their space invaded while they always protect the spaces of others. Every ignored boundary chips away at their trust. Every assumption about their time, energy, or empathy creates a hidden bruise. And because INFJs rarely confront these things outright, their withdrawal becomes the only honest language left to speak. They don't storm out, they fade. They don't argue, they disconnect. They don't explain, they observe. Their retreat is not dramatic, it is deliberate, a reclaiming of emotional territory that was slowly taken from them. And once they step back, the silence becomes louder than any confrontation could have been. It forces the other person to face what they refused to acknowledge. The INFJ was giving quietly, and they were taking loudly. By the time the INFJ truly withdraws, the decision is already final, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. They retreat because they finally understand that anyone who cannot feel their boundaries does not deserve their closeness. They withdraw because their empathy has been exploited, not appreciated. INFJs do not walk away when they are tired. They walk away when they finally see the truth. Their empathy was never valued, only used. For a long time, they give freely. They listen, they soothe, they carry the emotional storms of others with quiet devotion. People come to them for comfort, not realizing that every story, every confession, every unfiltered emotion leaves an imprint on the INFJ inner world. At first, the INFJ believes this exchange is mutual, meaningful. But slowly, painfully, they begin to notice that the flow only goes one way. What others perceive as kindness is often extraction, emotional unloading disguised as friendship, needs presented as urgency, gratitude replaced with expectation. The INFJ begins to sense the shift in tone, the way people approach them not out of connection, but out of convenience. The moment they stop giving, the atmosphere grows cold. The moment they need support, silence fills the room. And that is when the deepest wound forms, realizing that those they cared for would never have carried the weight they carried in return. Their withdrawal is not sudden. It begins internally with a question they were afraid to ask. If I stop giving, will anyone stay? When the answer reveals itself through behavior, not words, the INFJ no longer needs confrontation or closure. Their empathy, once a bridge connecting them to others, becomes the very reason they must leave. Because empathy without reciprocity becomes self-betrayal. So they retreat, not to punish, but to heal, not to make a statement, but to reclaim the emotional strength that was drained without consent. And once they withdraw from someone who exploited their empathy, they never return with the same softness again. They step back when their intuition warns them a situation or relationship is spiritually draining. INFJs do not wait for chaos to erupt before they pull away. They feel the collapse long before it becomes visible. Their intuition acts like a quiet alarm that only they can hear, a vibration in the background telling them something is off, something is dimming their inner light. It often begins subtly, a heaviness after conversations that used to feel warm, a sense of shrinking when they should feel understood, a quiet dread replacing the peace they once found in someone's presence. Most people mistake these sensations for mood swings or overthinking. But INFJs know better. They know when their spirit is being siphoned, even if they cannot yet articulate why. As they interact, they notice the energy dynamic shifting. They give clarity, but receive confusion. They offer emotional presence, but are met with emotional emptiness. They show understanding, but encounter indifference. Their intuition connects the dots faster than logic can keep up, revealing a truth they can no longer ignore. This bond is not nourishing, it is slowly eroding them. And once that realization lands, the INFJ does not argue, explain, or negotiate. They simply begin to step back. The withdrawal is quiet but absolute. They reduce emotional access, they stop overgiving, and they distance themselves from situations that once demanded their spirit. To others, it appears sudden. To the INFJ, it is the only way to prevent spiritual depletion. Because when their soul feels endangered by manipulation, by emptiness, by misalignment, they choose survival over attachment. And once they step away from what drains them, they never return to it with open hands again. They retreat to rebuild their identity after losing too much of themselves in silence. INFJs do not retreat because they are fragile. They retreat because they've given away pieces of themselves so quietly for so long that one day they wake up unable to recognize who they've become. Their withdrawal is not an escape, it is a reconstruction. By the time they reach this point, they have stretched themselves emotionally to hold others together, swallowed their own needs to preserve harmony, and carried unspoken burdens that were never theirs to begin with. In silence, they lost fragments of their identity, small compromises, softened truths, buried instincts. And because INFJs rarely complain, no one notices the erosion until they vanish. The retreat begins when they finally feel the weight of everything they have suppressed. They sense the gap between who they are and who they have performed to be. It is a subtle but devastating realization. They have been living in a version of themselves shaped by others' expectations, not their own truth. That recognition is unbearable for an INFJ, whose inner world demands authenticity above all else. So they pull back, not to punish others, but to stop the slow bleeding of their spirit. In solitude, they rebuild. They strip away the borrowed identities, the forced roles, the emotional masks they wore to keep peace. They sit in silence not because they are empty, but because they need space to refill. Every moment alone is a brick laid back into the foundation of their true self. And when they finally return, they are quieter, clearer, stronger. They become someone who no longer bends so easily, someone who refuses to disappear inside relationships or responsibilities again. Their retreat is not an ending, it is their rebirth. INFJs disappear not to rest, but to resurrect, returning as a version no one can control again. When an INFJ vanishes, people often assume they just need a break, a little space to breathe. But their disappearance is never that shallow. It is a transformation that happens behind closed doors, away from the noise, the expectations, the emotional weight that slowly crushed their spirit. By the time an INFJ pulls away completely, they are not stepping back. They are breaking open. Their silence becomes the furnace where the softer, self-sacrificing version of themselves is burned away, leaving only what is true, strong, and untouchable. This resurrection begins with a painful clarity. They finally see who drained them, who used their empathy as currency, who mistook their patience for permission. They replay conversations not to dwell, but to decode the patterns they ignored. They examine where they bent until they almost broke, where they silenced themselves to keep peace that wasn't real, where they gave compassion that was taken instead of cherished. In solitude, the fog lifts, the illusion ends, and something fierce awakens. Their return is subtle but undeniable. They speak less, but with sharper truth. They give less, but with stronger boundaries. They move differently, no longer seeking validation, understanding, or emotional reciprocity where it was never offered. The people who once controlled them through guilt, chaos, or emotional neediness find themselves powerless because the INFJ has stepped out of the role they were placed in. Their resurrection is not loud. It is a quiet reclamation of selfhood. They come back with their intuition heightened, their empathy refined, and their sense of identity restored. And the world they return to feels different, not because it changed, but because they did. They become someone who cannot be manipulated, drained, or diminished again. Their disappearance was not an escape. It was the beginning of their power. In the end, INFJs don't withdraw because they are weak. They withdraw because they're evolving into someone stronger than the world ever allowed them to be. Their silence is not the end of the story. It's the turning point. If you've ever felt yourself disappearing just to rebuild, understand this: nothing about that process is failure. It is the moment your real life begins. If this message resonated with you, stay with us, because understanding yourself is the first step, but becoming who you were meant to be is the real transformation. Subscribe to Brainy Quiet Mind so you never miss the next piece of the journey. And before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever withdrawn not to rest, but to rebuild? Write reborn if you feel that shift happening in you right now.